Our first scripture reading this morning is from the book of Matthew, chapter 11. At that time, Jesus said, I praise you, heavenly parent, director of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and learned and revealed them to little children. Yes, heavenly parent, for this is what you were pleased to do. All things have been committed to me by my parent. No one knows the offspring except the parent, and no one knows the parent except the offspring, and those to whom the offspring chooses to reveal the parent. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Ancient words for our present day consideration. The second scripture will be read and explained by Jim.
Hopefully I will. We're about to start a very strange series, which shouldn't surprise you if you've been here much. But I'm hoping that this series, not to be too ambitious for a sermon series, will radically transform how you understand Christianity. What we're going to be doing for the next bit of time is looking at the Sophia passages that the Protestant church just kind of ignores in general. The Catholic Church has more of them. The Bible that we give out when people join is based on, it's the Priests for Equality. And so they use the Catholic translation, which has books like Sirach, Wisdom of Solomon. We have the book of Proverbs, which has some of these. But in the ancient world, they believed that there is a kind of wisdom by which things are put together. This was symbolized by a female kind of deity named Sophia. Its simply word means wisdom. Largely ignored by the Christian church, but when it does come up, people are usually focused on the gender issues. They're trying to balance the kind of sexist language of traditional Christianity. And that's important to do, but the Sophia passages are much more foundational than that. And I'm hoping that at the end of this series, you'll realize that progressive Christianity is not a kind of escape from the truth of Christianity. Christianity is returning to progressive Christianity, that belief that science is something you can believe in. Progressive Christianity, that belief that all faiths have something to give us. Progressive Christianity, that belief that we're responsible for the world, and we can't use the Bible to mistreat other people. These basic beliefs of progressive Christianity were an essential part of the early church, at least in certain places. And that was lost when the church moved into Europe. At the beginning of time, it was understood that God isn't male or female. But because so many traditions had male gods, Sophia was very important to counterbalance that. But again, the meaning of the word was Sophia. It was wisdom. And Jesus is quoting from those passages throughout his ministry. So we're going to look at one of those examples today, but I'm going to be lining up a whole bunch of them. And I'm hoping at the end of this you'll realize that Christianity was not like it became. It's like it's not a call to close your mind. It's not a call to become a moralist or become cruel. What you've known in your heart since you were a child is that there's something deeper and truer than that. So I'm hoping this series will be very helpful. Now let me read Sirach. When you look for it, sometimes it's called Sirach, sometimes it's called Wisdom of Sirach, sometimes it's called Ecclesiasticus. It's going to sound a little complicated at the beginning, but the message, the punchline is very simple. Okay, so this is wisdom speaking. And realize that when people heard the Jesus quote, they had already heard this quote. That's what makes it so hard to understand these wisdom passages, because we start with traditional Christianity. The people that heard Jesus knew he was referring to something deeper and truer. So let's listen to what people would have already heard by the time Jesus talked about taking up his yoke. Again, this is wisdom speaking. Draw near to me, you who are uneducated, and lodge in the house of instruction. Why do you say you are lacking in these things? And why do you endure such great thirst? I opened my mouth and said, acquire wisdom for yourselves without money. Put your neck under her yoke and let your souls receive instruction. It is to be found close by. See with your own eyes that I have labored but little and found for myself much serenity. When Jesus spoke and said, take up my yoke, every Jewish person listening to that would have thought of Sophia first. When Jesus is said to have turned water into wine, every person that knew anything about the rest of the world would know that Dionysius had already done that. They're playing off of themes that are already there. And that's important to realize because they're under oppression. They've got Roman rulers, and they've got to speak in a way that doesn't get them killed. But the message is revolutionary. That's why it had to be coded. Jesus wasn't killed because he was a nice guy. The message was radical then. It would be radical now if we were faithful to it. When you hear those words, I'm the only way, only the begotten one knows the heavenly parent. Literally, only the Son knows the Father. Those words would feel very different if you realized the type of poetry that's being used. When Jesus said, take up my yoke, to us that sounds like saying, stick your head in the sacred stockade, put your wrists in the holy handcuffs, and just trust me. Surrender your responsibility as a human being. Surrender your agency to me, and I will not lead you off the cliff. And you know how that's worked out through history. It's very important to realize that in this wisdom vocabulary, Jesus is leading people to their own hearts. That the yoke first is whatever practice you have, whether you're religious or not, whatever practice that holds you together as a person. When we first start off, have you ever felt you're just unraveling, falling apart? The yoke that is being talked about is any practice. The word is related to the word for yoga in terms of its roots. Whatever practice you use to hold you together, it's what's being talked about here. And what is essential for Christians to remember that's been forgotten is that Jesus isn't calling you to believe in him when he says these words. He's calling you to become aware of wisdom all around you. Completely different religion. He's quoting wisdom texts. How many times did he say, I'm not talking about myself? And yet the church teaches it as though Jesus is talking about you have to come to him, you have to submit to him, you have to believe in him. Look at his sayings through the wisdom sayings. What if he's calling you to become aware? What if he wants you to be who you are? What if that's what the calling is? When Jesus says, my yoke is easy, it's important to realize that the word that's used there in Greek is one of the most important words in the early church. It's Christos, kindness, gentleness. And you see in some manuscripts where the word Christ and Christos get interchanged. That's how important it was. That's how important love was. That what was essential is not believing in just Christ, but what Christ was trying to lead us to, which is love. What if you had never been taught a version of Christianity where you had to pretend you don't think what you think? What if you've never been told to pretend to believe things in order to be accepted in our group? What if you'd never been told to pretend you don't have certain feelings, or you do have certain feelings? Jesus is leading us to our own heart. Jesus first is teaching us to see through our own eyes and feel through our own skin, because that's the only starting place. You and I have lots of flaws at the beginning. We all start off immature because we all start off as babies. But if that's not okay, then you're going to have to pretend your whole life that when you say the Apostles' Creed, you believe it all. Taking up the creeds without being able to see through your own eyes. In other words, having eyes but not being able to see. Remember that little metaphor that runs through it all? When all you know is the Apostles' Creed, you're being taught to be a parent. Has anybody ever been reading the Apostles' Creed and say, oh, now I know how I need to live my life? Anybody ever? Has anybody ever been like in a confirmation class and realized that they're answering questions I've never asked before? I could care less about this stuff. But then because somebody gets mad at you and you're a little kid, you think, well, they must know what they're talking about. They couldn't be ignorant if they had that big of a smirk. That doesn't turn out to be a very reliable guide to wisdom. So, Jesus and the wisdom teachers in general are leading us to start from where we really are. If you don't start as a caterpillar, you never get to the butterfly. Whoever you are, whatever you authentically feel, is the starting place. Then the yoke kind of changes its function. Now it becomes something that transforms you. What you don't realize in the metaphor is that the yoke is not a burden. It's so that two animals can pull in tandem. So it's cutting the weight in half. We don't realize that. When you start on your own heart, you'll start off as selfish. There's no other place to start. When you look at the world as a child, you think everything's happening to you. Because that's what it seems like. It seems like everything is, I'm at the center of everything. So I must be the most important thing. So that when things go wrong, and I ask the question, why is this happening to me? That's a very logical beginning. But what we don't realize is that at some point, our ego becomes the worst enemy we have. That nobody outside of us is hurting us like our own self-centered view is. It's not making us happy. It's not our true self either. Our relationships are very important to who we are. So there's a transformation that takes place, a second birth, if you will. That then you move out of the center of things. And for a while, Jesus takes that place as a place marker. So that you can understand, I'm a branch, I'm not the trunk of the tree. I say Jesus is, but Jesus is saying wisdom is. Whatever the creative principle of the universe is the core of your being. And we get there by being reborn into it. Not by repeating the old, but by being reborn and reshaped ourselves. Jesus didn't ask an 80-year-old to sit on his knee and said, become like this. Remember that story when the disciples are arguing who's the greatest? Jesus didn't take a pope and put it on the knee and say, be like this. Didn't put a Dalai Lama on the knee and say, become like this. He took a child. Because it has to be born out of you. doing your impression of what a righteous person is not going to be the radical transformation the world needs. So what's being talked about is being born again, but as a constant rebirth. When you're learning, every day is new. There's in the wisdom sayings, it's really different. You're not being called to dogma, you're being called to learning, to growing, to seeing each day as new. Listen to this from the wisdom from Sophia. The true meaning of wisdom is the desire to learn, and be passionate about learning is to love her. Let me say that again. This is the divine wisdom. The true meaning of wisdom is the desire to learn, and be passionate about learning is to love her, to be passionate. You don't have to hide from astronomy. When the church didn't look through Galileo's telescope, it was because of fear. It wasn't because of courage or wisdom. When people look at the new topography of human gender, and you realize it's not all boy and girl, it's not all blue and pink. It's a complicated tree of life. That could be exciting. And we're going to see there's all kinds of gender stuff in the Sophia passages that it would challenge the kind of binary understanding that is had. So the second thing that the yoke does is to help us transform us. It gives us a fulcrum to unravel an ego-centered worldview so that we find our true self, what we really care about in relationship. And then finally, there's a joyous moment where we realize that all of life is teaching us. All of life is guiding us. When I was a kid, I wanted to find the teacher so bad. That one teacher, or that one book, or that one religion, or that one practice. And I tried a whole bunch of them. And I was lucky enough not to find one. Because what that left me with is making life my teacher. Sophia, wisdom says, the gift is free. Sophia says it's all around you. You don't have to go looking for it. Sophia says it's available to the uneducated, the unlearning. Jesus says it's available to the exhausted, the people who don't have the energy to search. Because it's not about believing, it's about becoming aware, about awakening. Not only in ideas, but also from your pain. A part of you knows that the sacred is all around you. You may not know what the sacred is, but there's a gratitude for every butterfly, every tree, every flower. And a wisdom, some kind of cosmic wisdom. We'll be unpacking this in this series if we can. But when we looked at that text at the beginning, I don't know where you went, but I remember seeing that stuff. It's only me. Only the Son knows the Father. What that's saying is only the offspring. Only if you know that you're a product of the cosmic process do you understand the cosmic process. When Jesus speaks, it's for everybody, everywhere, all the time. Because he's talking about Sophia. He's quoting Sophia. And we're going to see that time and time again. Which means you don't have to pretend to believe things that don't make sense to you. It means you don't have to pretend to have feelings that you don't have. It means that you are an offspring of whatever wonderful genius has created this universe. And that you don't have to go looking for it. Because you are an expression of that miraculous wisdom. Well, this is my first attempt at it. We're going to have a bunch of attempts. Again, we're going to look at different things Jesus said and then look at in comparison to what the Sophia texts are. Let me close with the original text, and I'm just going to rephrase it and put wisdom where Jesus said I, because I think that's what he meant. Instead of come to me, all you who are weary, come to wisdom, all you who are weary and burdened. Where he says, I will give you rest. Wisdom will give you rest. Some of you are ahead of me already. Where he says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. That's not just a guy in Israel. Take wisdom upon you and learn from wisdom. Learn from her. For I am gentle. Wisdom is gentle and humble in heart. And you will find rest for your souls. Well, these are my struggles with the text. We invite you now to take a moment for you to think about how you understand these words.